The sound of breaking glass echoed through the marble hallway. Amaka's hands were still wet from washing the breakfast dishes when she heard Janet's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Amaka, get in here, now." She dried her hands quickly on her apron and hurried toward the sitting room, her worn slippers making soft sounds against the expensive Italian tiles. Janet stood near the ornate coffee table, a crystal vase lying in pieces at her feet. Water spread across the floor in a widening pool, and white lilies lay scattered like broken promises. "Before we begin, let me ask you something. What would you do if the person who made your life miserable was suddenly at your mercy? Would you help them, or would you walk away?" Keep that question in mind, because what happens in today's story will challenge everything you think you know about forgiveness, power, and what it really means to be human. If you're new here, welcome, and make sure to subscribe, because every week I bring you stories that will make you feel something real. Stories that stay with you long after they end. Now, let's dive in. "Look what you've done," Janet said, her voice cold and precise. "You placed this vase too close to the edge. I barely touched it." Amaka looked at the table. The vase had been positioned in the center that morning. She remembered because she'd measured the distance with her fingers, the way her mother taught her. But she said nothing. She had learned, over the past 8 months, that words were weapons she couldn't afford. "I'm sorry, Ma," Amaka whispered, already moving toward the storage closet for the mop. "Sorry?" Janet's laugh was sharp. "Sorry doesn't replace a $10,000 vase, does it? But of course, how would you know what $10,000 means? In your village, that's probably what your entire family makes in a year." The words landed like stones. Amaka felt them, the way she felt everything Janet said in the hollow space between her ribs where homesickness lived. She'd been 17 when she left Enugu, carrying nothing but a small bag and her mother's blessing. Lagos was supposed to be the answer. The big city. The place where hard work became success. She'd imagined herself going to evening school, maybe learning computer skills, sending money home for her younger siblings. Instead, she'd found this mansion with its 30 rooms and its mistress with 30 different ways to make her feel small. "Clean it up," Janet said, stepping over the glass in her designer heels. "And this time, do it properly. I don't want to see a single water stain." As Janet walked away, her perfume lingered expensive, suffocating. Amaka knelt on the cold floor and began picking up the pieces. From his study upstairs, Daniel heard none of this. He sat behind his mahogany desk, reviewing acquisition reports for his shipping company. At 43, he had everything a man was supposed to want. The business empire his father started had tripled under his leadership. The house sat on 2 acres in Ikoyi, the kind of property that appeared in luxury magazines. He had cars, investments, influence, and a wife who had grown colder with each million added to their net worth. He'd noticed, of course, the way Janet spoke to the staff, the way her kindness had limits that ended at the property gate. But business consumed him, and it was easier to sign checks than to confront the silence that had grown between them like ice. Besides, Janet had been different once. Or maybe he'd been too young to see clearly. They'd married 19 years ago when ambition looked like love and control looked like confidence. Amaka finished cleaning the sitting room and moved to her other duties. She washed, she ironed, she polished. She moved through the house like a ghost, visible only when needed, invisible when convenient. The other staff, there were 4 of them, kept their distance from her. Janet's cruelty had marked her as untouchable. Association meant risk. At noon, she prepared lunch. Janet wanted a salad, no dressing, no salt, specific vegetables arranged in a specific way. Amaka assembled it with the precision of a surgeon, knowing that perfection was still not enough. She carried the tray to the dining room. Janet sat at the long table, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up when Amaka approached. She never looked up. Amaka might as well have been furniture. "Leave it," Janet said. Amaka set the tray down carefully and turned to go. "Wait." She froze. Janet finally looked at the salad. Her eyes moved across it slowly, searching. Amaka's heartbeat filled her ears. "The tomatoes are cut wrong," Janet said. They weren't. Amaka had cut them exactly as instructed, thin wedges, seeds removed. "I'm sorry, Ma. I've lost my appetite." Janet pushed the plate away. "Take it. And don't let me see you waste food by eating it yourself. You're not here to get fat on my money." The words shouldn't have hurt anymore. But they did. Every single time. What Amaka didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that this was the last normal day. The last day of the old pattern, the familiar cruelty, the predictable pain. Quick pause. If you're feeling this story, subscribe to this channel, Wealth Stories right now. Trust me, you'll want more of these. It started with a headache. Janet felt it during her afternoon tennis lesson at the country club, a dull pressure behind her eyes that made the sunlight feel like knives. She blamed dehydration, drank water, continued playing. But by the time her driver brought her home at 6, the pain had spread down her neck and into her shoulders. Her skin felt hot and cold at the same time. "Get me aspirin," she told Amaka when she walked through the door. Amaka brought the medicine, a glass of water, a cold compress. Janet took the pills without a word of thanks and went upstairs to lie down. By midnight, she was burning with fever. Daniel stood by their bed, phone pressed to his ear, calling their family doctor. Janet lay curled on her side, shivering despite the 3 blankets covering her. Her face looked different in the lamplight, smaller, vulnerable. It reminded him of a version of her he'd almost forgotten. "Dr. Okonkwo is on his way," Daniel said, setting down his phone. He sat on the edge of the bed and placed his hand on her shoulder. She was trembling. "I'm cold," she whispered. "Daniel, I'm so cold." He added another blanket. The doctor arrived 40 minutes later, his medical bag in hand and his expression serious. He examined Janet while Daniel stood near the window, trying to control the fear rising in his chest. Fever was common. Fever was treatable. This was nothing. But Dr. Okonkwo's frown deepened as he checked her vitals. "Her temperature is very high," he said, 39.8, "and her pulse is rapid. I'm going to start her on antibiotics, but I want to run some tests. We should get her to the hospital first thing in the morning." "What do you think it is?" Daniel asked. "Could be any number of things. Viral infection, bacterial infection. We'll know more after the blood work." Any 4. The tests came back inconclusive. Janet spent 3 days at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. They ran every panel, every scan. The fever wouldn't break. She barely ate. Her skin took on a grayish tint, and dark circles appeared under her eyes like bruises. Specialists came and went, offering theories but no answers. "Could be an autoimmune response," one said. "Possibly a rare tropical pathogen," suggested another. They tried different medications. Nothing worked. Daniel stopped going to the office. He slept in a chair beside Janet's hospital bed, watching her fade in increments. She was conscious but distant, speaking in short sentences that didn't sound like her. The sharpness was gone from her voice. Something essential was dimming. On the 5th day, they brought her home. The hospital had done all it could without a diagnosis. Dr. Okonkwo arranged for private nursing care and promised to continue searching for answers, but his optimism sounded hollow. The house felt different with Janet sick upstairs. Quieter. The staff moved through their duties with unusual gentleness, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. Amaka prepared meals that went mostly uneaten. She changed bed linens, carried trays, witnessed Daniel's fear from the edges of rooms. And she said nothing about what she suspected. Because Amaka had seen this before. Not exactly this, but something close enough that recognition stirred in her memory like an old song. She'd been 12 when it happened in her village. A woman had fallen ill with fevers and chills and a strange gray pallor that no medicine could touch. The local clinic had been useless. It was Amaka's mother who'd finally helped, with herbs and incantations and an understanding that came from generations of knowledge passed mother to daughter. "Some sicknesses live in the body," her mother had explained, "but some live in the spirit." When the wind carries bad things, when someone walks through the wrong place at the wrong time, the sickness comes from outside the flesh. Medicine can't touch what doesn't live in the blood. Amaka had watched her mother work the rituals, the prayers, the careful preparation of remedies that had nothing to do with hospitals, and she'd watched the woman recover. But that was village knowledge. That was the kind of understanding people like Janet dismissed as primitive, as ignorant. Amaka had heard her say it once, laughing with her friends over wine. Can you imagine? They still believe in witch doctors and spirits. It's 2024, for God's sake. So Amaka kept silent. Even as she saw Janet weakening, even as she watched Daniel's hope crumble. It wasn't her place to speak, and part of her, a part she wasn't proud of but couldn't deny, thought maybe this was justice. Maybe this was the universe balancing scales that had been tipped too far in one direction. Before we get to what happens next, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. You won't regret it. 2 weeks passed. Daniel brought in more specialists. A doctor from South Africa, a diagnostician from London, who'd written papers on rare diseases. They examined Janet, consulted with each other in medical terminology that sounded like a foreign language, and left without answers. The bills mounted. Daniel spent money the way desperate men do, frantically, hopefully, uselessly. He would have bankrupted himself if it meant saving her. And that realization surprised him. Despite everything, despite the distance between them, despite the coldness that had replaced whatever they'd once had, he couldn't imagine a world without her in it. He loved her, or he loved the memory of who she'd been, or maybe he just couldn't separate one from the other anymore. Janet grew weaker. She stopped getting out of bed. The private nurse monitored her vitals around the clock, adjusting medications that did nothing. Her skin became papery. Her eyes remained closed more often than open. She looked like she was disappearing in slow motion, fading into the expensive sheets like watercolor in rain. Daniel stopped eating properly. He lost weight. Gray appeared in his beard seemingly overnight. He sat in his study for hours, staring at nothing, paralyzed by helplessness. This was not a problem money could solve. Not a situation where influence mattered. He'd built an empire by controlling variables, by finding solutions, by refusing to accept defeat. But he was being defeated anyway. On a Thursday afternoon, Amaka found him in the study. She'd brought tea, he'd stopped asking for it, but she made it anyway, the way she'd been taught. Care for others even when they don't care for you. Especially then. She knocked softly. No answer. She knocked again. Come in, his voice said, barely. She entered and stopped. Daniel sat slumped in his leather chair, his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. He was crying, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the kind of tears that came from a depth where shame no longer mattered. Amaka stood frozen, tea tray in hand. She'd never seen him like this, never seen any man like this. The sound of his grief filled the room. She should leave. She should set down the tea and go. But something held her there, something bigger than fear or training or the voice in her head that always told her to stay small. Sir, she said softly. He looked up, quickly wiping his face. Embarrassment flickered across his features. I'm sorry, Amaka. You can just... She's not going to get better with doctors, Amaka said. The words escaped before she could stop them. Daniel stared at her. What? Amaka's heart hammered. She'd crossed a line, but she'd already crossed it. She might as well keep going. Your wife's sickness, sir. It's not a normal sickness. He stood up slowly. His expression was unreadable. What are you talking about? I've seen this before. In my village, a woman became sick like this, fever, weakness, nothing helping. My mother. She paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound crazy. My mother is a healer. She knows about these things. Traditional things, spiritual things. Daniel's face hardened. Spiritual things? Yes, sir. Sometimes when people get sick, it's not because of germs or disease. It's because they've encountered something bad. A wrong place, a wrong time, The sickness comes from outside, not inside. That's why medicine doesn't work. That's ridiculous, Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. I know how it sounds, sir. I know you don't believe in these things. Your wife never did. Amaka looked down at the tea tray in her hands. But she's dying. And nothing else is working. The words hung in the air between them. Daniel sat down again, slowly. He looked at Amaka, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since she'd started working there. She was young, he realized. 17? 18? Just a girl, really, far from home. He'd never asked about her family, her story. She'd been invisible by design, Janet's design, and his complicity. What would your mother do? He asked. Amaka didn't expect the question. She would examine her. Not like a doctor. She would look for signs. And then she would prepare certain herbs, certain prayers. Things I don't fully understand. But I know they work, sir. I saw them work. Your mother is in Enugu? Yes, sir. Daniel rubbed his face. This was insane. He was a modern man, an educated man. He'd built his fortune on logic and calculated risks, not superstition and folk medicine. The idea of bringing in a village healer, what would people say? What would the doctors think? But Janet was dying, and he'd tried everything else. Can you? He stopped, started again. Do you know enough? Could you do what your mother does? Amaka's eyes widened. Sir, I'm not trained like she is. I've only watched. I've helped prepare things. But, could you try? The question was desperate, naked. He wasn't her employer in that moment. He was just a man watching his wife slip away. Amaka thought of Janet, of every cruel word, every deliberate humiliation, every day spent feeling worthless. She thought of the vase that hadn't been her fault, of meals criticized and effort dismissed, of being called village girl like it was an insult instead of just a fact. She could say no. She could let nature or whatever this was take its course. But she thought of her mother's words. The medicine works not because of who deserves it, but because healing is what we're meant to do. I can try, Amaka said quietly, but I need to see her, and I need certain things from the market. Specific herbs. Make a list. I'll send someone to get everything. No, sir. I need to get them myself. The herbs have to be fresh and I need to choose them. My mother taught me how to look, how to smell, how to know which ones have power. Daniel hesitated for only a moment. Take a driver. Get what you need. Money is no object. Amaka nodded and left. That evening, she returned with a cloth bag full of herbs, roots, and other items that made the driver nervous enough to keep his distance. She spread them out on a table in the kitchen, sorting through them with careful hands. The cook watched from the doorway, curious and skeptical. You really think this village medicine will work? The cook asked. I don't know, Amaka said, honestly, but I have to try. She prepared a liquid from the herbs, boiling, straining, adding ingredients in a specific order her mother had drilled into her memory. The kitchen filled with a sharp, earthy smell. When it was ready, she poured the mixture into a cup and carried it upstairs. Daniel met her at the bedroom door. Is that it? Yes, sir. She needs to drink this. A small amount, 3 times a day, and she hesitated. And what? I need to perform a cleansing. Tonight. It's not complicated, but it needs to be done while she sleeps. What kind of cleansing? Amaka explained as best she could the ritual her mother had taught her, involving smoke from certain leaves, words spoken in Igbo, the tracing of symbols. It sounded absurd even to her own ears, but Daniel, to her surprise, simply nodded. Do it, he said. I'll stay with you. They entered the bedroom together. Janet lay unconscious, her breathing shallow. The nurse had gone home for the evening. Daniel had given her the night off, wanting privacy for this strange experiment he couldn't quite believe he was allowing. Amaka approached the bed slowly. Up close, Janet looked even worse. Her cheeks were hollow, her lips cracked. She looked like she was already halfway to wherever death lived. Madam, Amaka whispered. I'm going to help you. She lifted Janet's head gently and brought the cup to her lips. Getting the liquid into her mouth took patience, but eventually Janet swallowed. Once, twice, 3 times. Enough. Then, Amaka began the ritual. She lit a bundle of leaves and let the smoke fill the room, moving it around Janet's body in specific patterns. She spoke words in Igbo old words, powerful words, words her mother had taught her were older than memory. Daniel stood against the wall, watching. He didn't understand the language, didn't understand the ritual, but something in the room shifted. The air felt heavier, or lighter, he couldn't tell which. Amaka traced symbols in the air above Janet's body, invisible marks that somehow felt visible. She whispered prayers to ancestors, to spirits, to forces that existed outside the realm of balance sheets and stock portfolios. Finally, she stepped back. It's done, she said. Now what? Daniel asked. Now we wait. If this is what I think it is, she'll start to improve by morning. The fever will break first. Then her strength will return. But it takes time. Daniel looked at his wife, searching for any sign of change. There was none. She looked exactly the same, dying, disappearing. Get some rest, he told Amaka. And, thank you, for trying. Amaka nodded and left. She didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small room in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she just made everything worse. What if it didn't work? What if Janet died anyway, and they blamed her? What if practicing her mother's medicine without proper training had somehow made things worse? But she'd seen the signs. The gray skin, the unbreakable fever, the way regular medicine did nothing. It was the same pattern. She had to believe it would work. Morning came slowly. Daniel hadn't slept either. He'd sat beside Janet's bed all night, watching her breathe, checking her pulse every few minutes. The nurse had returned at 6 and looked at him with concerned sympathy. Sir, you should rest. I can monitor her. No, I need to be here. At 7:30, Janet's eyes opened. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just a slow flutter of lids, consciousness returning like water filling a glass. Daniel? Her voice was weak but clear. He nearly fell out of his chair. Janet, you're awake. What? How long was I? 2 weeks. You've been so sick. But you're awake. God, you're awake. The nurse rushed over, checking vitals. Her eyes widened. Her temperature, it's down, 37.2. That's nearly normal. Daniel felt something break open in his chest, relief so intense it felt like pain. Janet tried to sit up. She was still weak, but the grayness was gone from her skin. Color was returning to her face like sunrise. I had the strangest dreams, she murmured. I dreamed I was walking through fog, and I couldn't find my way out, and then someone was there. Singing. A woman singing. Daniel held her hand. You're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. By afternoon, Janet was eating solid food. By evening, she was sitting up without help. The nurse called it a miracle. Dr. Okonkwo, when he arrived to check on her, looked baffled and relieved in equal measure. I've never seen anything like it, he said. Yesterday she was, and now, this is extraordinary. Daniel didn't tell him about Amaka, about the herbs and the ritual and the words in Igbo. He didn't need to understand how it worked. It had worked. That was enough. But Janet needed to know. 3 days later, when she was strong enough to leave the bed and sit in the chair by the window, Daniel told her everything. He explained about Amaka's mother, about the traditional healing, about the ritual performed while she slept. Janet listened in silence, her hands folded in her lap. Her expression was unreadable. When he finished, she asked, "Where is Amaka now?" "Working. Downstairs. I need to see her." Daniel called for her. Amaka came upstairs, nervous, unsure. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom, waiting. Janet looked at her for a long moment. "Come here," she said finally. Amaka approached slowly. Sir told me what you did, Janet said. Her voice was different, softer, but not weak. He said you saved my life. I did what I could, Ma. You did more than that. Janet's eyes were shining. You did what no one else could. After everything after how I treated you. Her voice broke. Amaka stood very still. She didn't know what to say, didn't know what was allowed. I'm sorry, Janet whispered. I'm so sorry. For everything. For every cruel word. Every impossible standard. Every time I made you feel small. I was awful to you. I don't even know why. I think I was so afraid of not being in control, of not being perfect, that I took it out on you. On everyone. But especially you. Tears ran down her face now. Real tears. The kind that came from a place deeper than pride. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve what you did for me. But I'm asking anyway. Please. I'm so sorry. Amaka felt something shift inside her, a weight she'd been carrying without realizing it. Anger she'd been holding like armor. It didn't disappear completely. Hurt that deep doesn't vanish with one apology. But it loosened, softened, made room for something else. I forgive you, Ma, Amaka said quietly. And she meant it. Janet reached out her hand. Amaka took it. They stayed like that for a moment, two women from completely different worlds, connected by something neither of them fully understood but both of them felt. In the days that followed, things changed. Daniel sat with Amaka in his study and asked her about her family, her village, her dreams. He really listened for the first time. Then he wrote a check that made her gasp. For saving my wife's life, he said, and for your family, so your siblings can go to school, so your mother has everything she needs. But more than the money, though the money helped, God, the money helped, he did something else. He enrolled Amaka in evening classes, computer skills, accounting, business management. He told her that when she was ready, there would be a position for her in his company. A real position, not a maid, a professional. You're smart, he said. Smarter than I gave you credit for. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Janet changed too. She still had high standards, some things were too deep to completely uproot, but the cruelty was gone. She learned Amaka's name meant God is beautiful in Igbo. She asked about Amaka's village, about her mother's healing practices, about the world she'd dismissed as primitive. She learned to see. One evening, months later, Amaka stood in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Not as a maid anymore, she'd been promoted to Janet's personal assistant, helping manage the household staff and Janet's charitable foundation. But she still enjoyed cooking, still found peace in the familiar motions. Janet walked in and stood beside her. What are you making? Ofe sala. A soup from my village. Can you teach me? Amaka looked at her in surprise. Janet smiled. I want to learn, if you'll show me. So they cooked together. Janet followed Amaka's instructions, chopping vegetables with unpracticed hands, learning to blend palm fruit and stockfish and uziza leaves. She made mistakes. She laughed at herself. She looked lighter than Amaka had ever seen her. Thank you, Janet said as they worked, for not letting me die. Even though I gave you every reason to. You would have done the same, Amaka said. Janet paused, her hands stilling. I don't think I would have. A few months ago, I don't think I would have. But I hope I'm becoming the kind of person who would. That night, the household ate ofe sala together, staff and family at the same table. It was Daniel's idea, and no one objected. They shared the meal Amaka and Janet had made, and the kitchen filled with laughter and conversation that crossed boundaries that had seemed permanent. Amaka sat at that table and thought about her mother's words, about healing being what we're meant to do, about how sometimes the sickest people aren't the ones in bed with fever, sometimes they're the ones who've forgotten how to be human, and sometimes all it takes is someone willing to offer medicine, even when it isn't deserved. Especially then. The soup was good. The company was better. And outside the window, Lagos stretched out under its blanket of lights, the city that had promised Amaka nothing, but had given her everything she needed to learn. That home isn't a place. It's what we build when we choose to see each other. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones fighting battles we can't see. Janet's cruelty wasn't about Amaka. It was about her own fear of losing control, her own emptiness that no amount of wealth could fill. And Amaka's choice to heal someone who had wounded her wasn't weakness, it was the kind of strength that changes everything. Because here's what we often forget. Forgiveness isn't about saying what someone did was okay. It's about refusing to let their actions poison who we become. Amaka could have let Janet suffer. She would have been justified. But she chose something harder. She chose to be better than her circumstances demanded. And in doing so, she didn't just save a life. She transformed one, including her own. So here's the question I want to leave you with today. When was the last time you chose compassion for someone who didn't deserve it, and how did it change you? Think about that. Really think about it. If this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, because every week, I bring you stories that remind us what it means to be human. Stories that challenge us to be better, to see deeper, to love harder. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been in Amaka's position? Or maybe Janet's? What did you learn? And share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Because stories like this, they're meant to be passed on. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.